I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but if you're the kind of person who would rather spend a Friday night with a book than a room full of people, if you go quiet in arguments instead of getting loud, if you already know your next 3 moves, but you haven't told a single soul, this video was made for you. And you know what's strange? The very things that made you feel like an outsider your whole life, the quietness, the overthinking, the refusal to just go along with things, those aren't flaws in your character. Those are features of your intelligence. Stay with me for the next 7 minutes, because I'm going to show you 7 signs that the people around you have probably misread about you your entire life. And by sign number 4, I guarantee you're going to feel something shift. Let's get into it. Sign number 1. You read. Not because you have to, because you can't stop. Not assigned reading. Not self-help books you bought to look productive. I mean real reading. The kind where you pick something up at 10 p.m. and suddenly it's 2 in the morning and you don't even feel tired because your brain is too busy being fed. History, philosophy, science, fiction that makes you think about being human differently. Biographies of people who changed the world and why. You don't read to show off. You read because something in you is always hungry. Research published in the journal Psychological Science found that reading, particularly deep, sustained reading, builds what psychologists call crystallized intelligence. The accumulated knowledge, pattern recognition, and contextual understanding that compounds over time like interest in a bank account. Every book you've ever finished made your brain structurally different from what it was before. And here's what most people don't realize. The gap between a person who reads deeply and a person who doesn't isn't just a knowledge gap. It's a thinking gap, a perspective gap, a depth gap. You see more layers in situations than others do, because you've spent years voluntarily going deeper than the surface. That's not a hobby. That's architecture. You have been quietly building a more powerful mind, 1 page at a time. Sign number 2. You are one of the quietest people in the room, and also one of the most aware. You don't talk just to fill silence. You don't perform opinions you haven't actually thought through. You don't raise your voice to prove a point. And people have probably read that wrong your entire life. They called you shy, reserved, distant, maybe even arrogant because you weren't performing for them. Here's what was actually happening. Research in cognitive psychology consistently shows that highly intelligent individuals are more selective about verbal output, meaning they think before they speak, and they speak less overall, because they're more aware of the cost of saying something imprecise or unnecessary. There's also this. A study from the University of Minnesota found that people who speak less in group settings are often processing more than anyone else in the room. They're observing, cataloging, running silent analysis on every dynamic playing out in front of them. You weren't disengaged. You were the most engaged person there. The quiet ones aren't the ones with nothing to say. They're the ones who know exactly what they're looking at and have decided that most of it doesn't deserve a response. Sign number 3. You walk away from arguments, not because you're weak, but because you already know how they end. Someone says something wrong, or unfair, or just completely detached from reality. And instead of engaging, you go quiet. You take a breath. You remove yourself from a situation. And then later, alone, you think through the entire argument in perfect detail. Every counterpoint, every flaw in their logic, everything you could have said. People have probably told you that you need to stand up for yourself, that you're too passive, that you let people walk over you. That's not what's happening. Research on conflict avoidance and intelligence shows that highly intelligent individuals are significantly more likely to disengage from unproductive confrontations, not because they don't see the problem, but because they've already calculated that the argument won't change anything. Average minds fight to win. High minds fight only when winning is actually possible, and when the cost is worth the outcome. You don't avoid conflict because you're afraid. You avoid it because you've already run the simulation and you know exactly how it ends. That's not weakness. That's efficiency. Sign number 4. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. This one is going to feel different, because most people expect intelligence to feel like confidence, like having all the answers, like certainty. But real intelligence feels like the opposite. The more you understand about any subject, the more clearly you can see all the things you don't understand yet. The more questions appear, the more complexity reveals itself. There's a concept in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect, the finding that people with limited knowledge consistently overestimate their competence, while people with genuine expertise consistently underestimate it. The people who are loudest about how much they know usually know the least. And you, the one who hesitates before claiming certainty, who qualifies your statements, who says, I think, instead of I know, when you're not completely sure, you're not being insecure. You're being accurate. Intellectual humility is one of the strongest predictors of long-term learning and cognitive growth, because a mind that thinks it's already full stops taking things in. A mind that knows it has room, keeps expanding. You are not behind. You are paying attention at a level that most people never reach. Sign number 5. You notice what's broken, in systems, in logic, in the way things are supposed to work. You're in a meeting. Someone presents a plan. Everyone nods. And you're sitting there thinking, wait, but what about this? And this? And if X happens, this entire thing falls apart at step 3. You read terms and conditions that others just click through. You notice the fine print. You ask, but what actually happens when this goes wrong, when everyone else is celebrating that it works? People have called you pessimistic, difficult, a buzzkill. Here's what's actually happening. Systems thinking, the ability to mentally model complex processes, identify weak points, and anticipate failure modes, is one of the highest order cognitive skills a human brain can perform. Research in organizational psychology consistently links this trait to above-average general intelligence and executive function. You're not looking for problems because you're negative. You're looking for problems because your brain automatically models reality at a higher resolution than most people's. While others see the surface of how things work, you see the structure underneath, the assumptions, the dependencies, the single points of failure. That's not cynicism. That's engineering-level thinking applied to everyday life. Sign number 6. Nobody knows your next move. And you planned it that way. You don't announce your goals. You don't post about your plans. You don't tell people what you're working on until it's already done. While everyone around you is talking about what they're going to do, you're already doing it. And when results appear, they seem to come out of nowhere to everyone watching. This isn't secretiveness for its own sake. This is strategic intelligence. Research in behavioral psychology shows that verbalizing goals prematurely creates what psychologists call a social reality. Your brain registers the announcement itself as partial completion of the goal, which reduces the motivation to actually follow through. Highly intelligent individuals intuitively avoid this trap. They understand that words are not action, that plans announced are plans diluted, that the work itself is the only thing that counts. There's also something else at play. When you don't reveal your moves, you maintain strategic optionality. You can change direction. You can adapt. You aren't locked into a publicly stated path. Your silence isn't mystery for show. It's discipline. It's protection. It's the move itself. Sign number 7. You are curious about everything, and it never really turns off. Not just your field. Not just your interests. Everything. How planes stay in the air. Why certain historical empires collapsed. What consciousness actually is. How a random stranger ended up living the life they're living. Why a particular song produces a specific emotion every single time. You ask questions that have no practical value, and you can't help it. Curiosity at this level isn't just a personality trait. Research published in Perspectives on Psychological Science found that intellectual curiosity, measured as a sustained drive to explore ideas across domains, is one of the strongest independent predictors of academic achievement and cognitive performance, sometimes rivaling IQ scores themselves. Your curiosity isn't a distraction from intelligence. It is intelligence. In its most active, most alive, most restless form. The world makes sense differently to a curious mind. Not as a fixed set of facts to be memorized, but as an infinite set of questions waiting to be pulled apart and understood. You were never meant to just accept the world as it was handed to you. You were built to interrogate it. So let's land this. A mind that reads deeply. A voice that speaks precisely. A self that refuses pointless battles. The humility to know how much is still unknown. Eyes that see the cracks in every system. Hands that move in silence. And a curiosity that never, ever shuts off. That is not a collection of quirks. That is a portrait of a genuinely powerful mind, living quietly inside a world that doesn't always know what to do with it. And if this entire video felt like someone finally said out loud what you've been carrying privately for years, you already know what that means. Drop a comment right now. Tell me, which one of these 7 hit you somewhere you didn't expect? Just the number, 1 through 7. I read every single one. And if someone in your life needs to finally understand what makes them different, share this with them. Because somewhere out there, someone is sitting alone, wondering why they've never quite fit. And they need to know that the very thing that sets them apart is the thing that makes them extraordinary. I'll see you in the next one.